What's going on there, YouTube? And welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, guys, so we are basically going to do a very important Spider-Man book. This Spider-Man book is basically Spider-Man Civil War. This is very important because this is the tie-in to the main Civil War storyline. But remember, when it came to Civil War, it was a big event that Marvel gave us. But of course, it affected a lot of different characters and teams, especially Spider-Man. Because this is the book where Spider-Man tells the world that he is Peter Parker. And after this book right here, a lot of stories after this one was built off this story right here. So Back in Black, One More Day, those two books right there are especially built off this book right here. Because it's Peter Parker telling the world that he is Spider-Man. And you see why he told the world that he is Spider-Man. And so to begin today's book, we actually do pick up with Peter Parker right now talking to Aunt May and Mary Jane, because right now he's asking them for some advice. Now, for the way the story was told to us back in, I want to say 2006 and 7, we had no idea that he was going to tell the world that he was Spider-Man. But with this story being kind of old now, we definitely know he was going to tell the world that he was Spider-Man. Now, with this opening page, Aunt May and Mary Jane, they have no idea what Peter Parker is about to ask them. But of course, they know it has to be something very important. Now, we actually jump back in time, where we actually do pick up with Peter Parker and Tony Stark on a private jet. Now, the reason why they're on a private jet is because they're flying over to where the Civil War actually started happening at. And what I mean is that the way Civil War started was you had a group of heroes basically go after a character known as Nitro, and Nitro exploded. And when he did explode, it killed 600 people. And of course, that what led to Civil War, this one incident right here. Because right after that explosion, you had the American government say, okay, heroes and villains, they need to be registered under us, meaning that if they're going to have their powers and be out there in the world using their powers, they have to work for the American government. If they don't, they get thrown in jail. Now, right now, at this point of the story with Peter Parker and Tony Stark, they're just going to where the battle happened at, where Nitro blew up at. And so the law has not been made yet. Sides have not been chosen yet. Right now, it's just Peter Parker, Tony Stark, the rest of the Avengers going to where the explosion happened at to see how bad it truly is. And of course, we know how bad it was. We saw it in the main Civil War storyline, but also in other books that we have been covering that kind of go back to this story right here. And so 2 hours after that conversation between Peter Parker and Tony Stark on the private jet, they do arrive at the actual site of where the explosion happened at, thanks to Nitro, where of course you do have our heroes kind of just looking around and see how bad things truly are. Because after they have dug up all the dead bodies, after they had helped all the different survivors, now they're looking at how bad things truly are. Because these people have lost their homes, survivors. They have lost their homes. They have lost their jobs. And it's kind of like, what's the next step for them? Now, you do have Iron Man say they have to make one more stop. And the reason why, because Tony Stark just got a call from the president. And this is actually going to lead right into the Civil War storyline. Over to the White House and talk to the president. And when he does, you have the president tell Tony Stark, hey, listen, man, because what happened in Connecticut with that explosion killing 600 people, the American government is going to make a new law. And this new law says if you're going to have powers and use those powers, you need to be registered and working for the American government. If you're not, you're basically breaking the law and you'll be thrown into jail. And so this begins the process of the Civil War, because of course you have heroes believe that they should be able to go out in the world, be a hero, but the world not knowing who they truly are as a way to protect their loved ones. But for right now, the president, he doesn't care, because he does bring up one good point. Right now, the public looks at heroes and villains as the same. Both sides are bad guys because they're always fighting. There's always some big, huge battle that's happening here, there, or wherever, and innocent people are losing lives, losing their homes, their jobs. And so with that, it's the president saying, Tony Stark, one question, are you Iron Man? And Tony Stark says yes. And you didn't have the president say, okay, cool. That right there shows me that you can basically lead my program. I want this to start now. In a week or two, whatever, it has to start soon. Where you go around grabbing anybody who is basically breaking the law. If they're breaking the law, they get thrown in jail. Now, of course, you have Tony Stark tell Peter Parker this, and Peter Parker's all like, but there are people out there who hide who they are to protect their loved ones. But it's Tony Stark saying, you have to realize what happened. With that explosion killing that many people in just one setting, the entire world, really the entire country, not the world, the country is looking at us as bad guys. And we have to show them that not all of us are actually bad guys. Now, you do have Peter Parker and Tony Stark arrive back at an airport. And when they do, you have Tony Stark basically asking Peter Parker to join his side, saying that I want you as my right-hand man. And the reason why, because when this pops off, there is going to be a split between the superhero community. And I don't want that, but it's going to happen. And so when it does happen, I want to be prepared for it. And so with that, I want to make sure you're on my side before that split actually happens. But if you do join my side, Peter, you have to tell the world who you are. You have to tell the world that you are Spider-Man. And of course, for Peter Parker, he's kind of like, wait, what? If I do that, my loved ones are in danger. Aunt May, Mary Jane, my friends are also in danger. But this is Tony Stark saying you have to look at the big picture. The community, the nation, they hate us right now. And there's going to be a split between the superhero community, and we should try to prevent that. But of course, we know it's going to happen either way. But I want to make sure you're on my side. And you have Peter Parker tell Tony he needs time to think. And Peter Parker realized that he should stay with Tony for one good reason: money. Because if he leaves Tony, he's on his own. And him, Mary Jane, don't have a lot of money. And so this is Peter Parker realizing what he has to do to protect his family and himself as well. And so when we actually dive into the present day, once again, we actually pick back up where the video started off at, where you actually have Peter Parker talking to Mary Jane and Aunt May about this big time decision, because it's huge. It's very important. You're basically talking about the idea of telling the entire world that you are Spider-Man. It could affect your life, Mary Jane's life, and Aunt May's life. And Mary Jane, she does bring up one good question. If you don't do it, will Tony Stark arrest you? In reality, he will. And so it's kind of like, do I tell the world who I am to protect my family, somewhat protect them, but to also be next to them? Or do not tell the world, break the law, possibly lose my family, and possibly die trying to get away to protect my family? There's so many different things that are making it hard for Peter Parker to actually choose. But after a few more pages, you actually do have Aunt May being able to convince Peter Parker to go ahead and do it. Go ahead and tell the world who you are. Tell the world that you are Spider-Man. And so, to wrap up the first chapter of this storyline, we actually do pick up with Peter Parker right now in a Spider-Man outfit, getting ready for a huge press conference. Tony Stark is there too. A lot of different news channels are also there as well, because this is the moment where you have Peter Parker preparing himself to tell the world that he is Spider-Man. And so when we get into the opening of the second chapter, we actually do pick up with Peter Parker telling the world that he is Spider-Man. It's a huge moment because, again, not a lot of people actually knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. Only a handful of people actually knew that. And now the entire world knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. It's huge. It's very huge. But with that being said, though, we actually pick up with Robbie Robertson and J. Jonah Jameson. Because remember, JJ, he's a guy who actually owns the Daily Bugle. He's the one who gave Peter Parker a job to go out there and take pictures, basically, of himself. And Robbie Robertson has always been in Peter Parker's corner, kind of helping him out anytime Peter Parker needed help. And to me personally, I always say to myself that Robbie Robertson was kind of like another father figure for Peter Parker in a way. But with Peter Parker telling the world that he is Spider-Man is huge, because you have JJ just angry. He's mad. And the thing is, he has the right to be upset, because he just found out the kid that he gave a job to take photos of Spider-Man was Spider-Man himself. And Peter Parker just tarnished this bond between him and JJ. It's gone. And for Robbie, possibly as well. And so, of course, for Peter Parker, it was a huge thing. Right after he told the world that he was Spider-Man, ran the bathroom, threw up. Because it's something he was not really prepared to do in his life. He knew there could be a day where the world found out that he was Peter Parker. But no matter how you prepare yourself, it's just something you can't actually prepare yourself for when it happens. Like, you may say, don't worry, when it happens, I'll be ready. But when it does happen, you're still not ready. And for Peter Parker, he still wasn't ready for the world to find out. But the world now knows. And so he's throwing up all over the place in the bathroom. And for Tony Stark, it's Tony trying to calm down Peter Parker. But at the same time, it's Tony Stark saying, hey, man, listen. What you did was a great thing, because you are basically helping me out and showing other heroes they need to do the right thing, which is basically showing the world they need to work for the American government if they're going to be a hero or villain in this world. Now, right after that moment right there, you do have Marvel show us how does the public actually feel about the idea of Peter Parker being Spider-Man. How does the public feel? Because there's some people out there who look at Peter Parker as a hero, and there are also other people out there who look at Peter Parker as Spider-Man as a villain, as a menace. And so right now you have a lot of people kind of upset with Peter Parker telling the world that he is Spider-Man. Now, once he's inside his limo that was given to him by Tony Stark, that is the moment you have Reed Richards actually call up Peter Parker to say, hey man, congrats. What you did was the right thing, to tell the world who you were, to tell the world that you are Spider-Man, but to show other heroes they need to do the right thing, which is basically join our side. Work for the American government. Tell the world who you are so that they can actually feel somewhat safe about you. But of course, that's the same moment you do have Mary Jane call up on the other phone, and it kind of leads into this weird thing where Mary Jane is talking to Reed Richards and Susan Storm on the other phone. Like you have two phones and they're talking to each other through the two phones that Peter Parker is holding. It's really weird. But either way, it's kind of Marvel showing us that Reed and Susan are on Tony Stark's side. Not Steve Rogers, Tony Stark's side. Now, right before Peter Parker is able to get on a private jet to basically go back home to the Avengers Tower, that is the moment he does get a letter that basically telling him that he's being sued by the Daily Bugle. Because again, with Peter Parker coming out to the world that he is Spider-Man, a lot of people had no idea he was Spider-Man. And so for J. Jonah Jameson, he feels like Peter Parker just spit in his face. JJ took care of him. JJ gave him money for pictures of himself. And now here's Peter Parker coming out to the world to say, hey, I'm Spider-Man. It's JJ saying, I looked at you as the son somewhat, but you just took my trust and broken it. And now I'm going to sue you. Now, of course, the next few pages are kind of showing us other people who are finding out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Like, for example, Flash Thompson. Because you have to remember, Flash Thompson was a huge Spider-Man fan, but he never had a clue that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. And so finding out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man is huge for Flash Thompson. But not just for Flash, you also have Eddie Brock, Doc Ock, and even Vulture as well. And I mean all the different villains out there in Peter Parker's life as Spider-Man are finding out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And the heroes that Peter Parker had fought alongside with are also finding out that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. It's a huge thing for the entire world right now, especially for the character of Spider-Man. And so then you do have Peter Parker being able to get back home to Avengers Tower to basically see Mary Jane. They kind of cuddle for a brief second until they both realize that Tony Stark is right now giving out a live press conference. Now, this press conference is actually very important. And the reason why, because this is the moment where you basically have Tony Stark telling the world that him and a few other characters are going to go out there and collect heroes who are not going to follow the new law. Now, at first, most of the heroes he names are people who actually knew that they will be doing this. They knew that they would go out there in the world to capture old friends who are basically breaking the new law. But one person did not know that. That one person is Spider-Man, because you have Tony Stark say Spider-Man's name as well, like Spider-Man is going to help Iron Man actually capture other heroes who are breaking the law. And Peter Parker, he had no idea about this at all. Now, you do have Peter Parker wanting to go outside to get some fresh air, because again, this is just huge news for him. Finding out that apparently he's going to be part of some kind of strike team that's going to go around to actually capture other heroes. And so when he walks outside, that is the moment he has somebody pull a gun on him, because there was a crowd of people who were protesting the idea of this new law. And so when they see Spider-Man, they're like, hey, Iron Man just said that you're going to help him capture other heroes who are not going to follow that law. And these are people who look up to those heroes more than the heroes who are going to work with the law. And so right now you have this crowd of people wanting to shoot Peter Parker and Mary Jane, because Mary Jane came with Peter Parker to also get some fresh air. And so when this guy pulls a gun out to shoot Peter Parker had to shoot a web to stop him, but of course go back inside. And so now it's basically Peter Parker, Mary Jane, Aunt May, they're trapped inside Avengers Tower. If they go outside, they're basically confronted by people who are protesting this new law. Now, you do have Peter Parker actually meet up with Tony Stark, and when they do meet up, you have Peter Parker tell Tony Stark that he is not happy about the idea of having his name thrown out there like that without actually being talked to about the idea of being part of a strike team that's going to go around to capture other heroes. Now, after a few minutes of talking, you actually do have Tony Stark calm down Spider-Man and say, listen, we're here now. Let's work together because you and me and the team, we're all here together. We got some work to do right now. Now, when we actually get into the third chapter of this storyline, we actually do pick up with Peter Parker and the rest of Iron Man's team fighting against some members of Captain America's team. Now, of course, the way the story is being told to us, Steve Rogers is not there at the moment. But either way, it's to show us that now you have the Civil War actually happening. Captain America versus Spider-Man is actually happening right now. The two sides are fighting against one another, which is kind of huge. Now, you do have Tony Stark basically telling his team and Spider-Man about their next mission. And of course, their next mission is to transport a bunch of heroes that they have captured over to a nearby prison. Now, of course, the reason why these heroes are going to be kind of escorting this transport is because they are afraid of the possibility that Steve Rogers and his team could just appear out of nowhere to break out the heroes that Tony Stark and his team had basically captured. And so right now you have everyone kind of like, okay, we got to make sure this transport actually goes smooth. Now, with that being said, Tony Stark makes sure that Peter Parker is right by his side. Now, for Peter Parker, he's kind of wondering why in the world is Tony Stark keeping me by his side so much? Like, is he worried that I'm going to betray him? Now, Tony Stark actually does tell Spider-Man, no, the reason why I'm keeping you right next to me is because you have a spider sense. So you're able to actually tell me when something is about to pop off that could basically ruin this transport. And so for now, for Peter Parker, he's kind of like, okay, I'm going to believe what Tony Stark just told me, but I know there's more to the story. Now, of course, that is the moment you actually do have Peter Parker tell Iron Man that right now his spider sense is going off, which means that, of course, Captain America and the rest of his team are nearby. And of course, they are. But you have Iron Man say, okay, fine, we'll go down a different route. The problem is, though, the route they're going down is basically Yancey Street. And that is very important because that was the home where Ben Grimm actually grew up on. And so, of course, it's kind of like, why would you go down this street? And that's the moment you have Ben Grimm there beginning to attack Iron Man and his team, which of course does mean the rest of Steve Rogers and his team do appear to hope they can be able to break free the heroes who got captured. Now, for Spider-Man, it actually does lead into a battle between him and Steve Rogers. Now, this battle is actually very important, and the reason why, because Peter Parker actually looks up to Steve Rogers. He looks up to him as a man who has done a lot of great things for this country, but a man who's kind of like a father figure, at the same time maybe like a big brother figure for Peter Parker, because Steve Rogers is that guy. What he usually says is law, and he used to represent America, but now America is basically split in two, where you have heroes fighting against heroes. You have the public actually choosing sides. And so right now it's kind of like, who's in the right here, Steve Rogers or Peter Parker? Even though Peter Parker looks up to Steve Rogers, right now, it doesn't matter because Peter Parker chose a side, and that side was Tony Stark's side. And so, of course, it actually does lead into a battle between both sides, but of course, it leads into Peter Parker fighting against Steve Rogers. Now, with all that being said, you do have Spider-Man being able to actually draw blood from Steve Rogers, but Steve Rogers has to lead the fight to basically help out the rest of his team that is being under attack. And so it's kind of like a draw here. We'll never know who can actually win a battle between Steve Rogers and Spider-Man, not with this fight, because Steve Rogers actually leaves. Now, as a way to close off today's video on a cliffhanger, and we'll do part 2 very soon, but as a way to kind of leave off with a cliffhanger here, you basically do have Peter Parker begin to think to himself about the idea if he's actually on the right side. Did he choose the right side? Because right now he's wondering, is he on the right side or the wrong side? Because he's now out there capturing heroes who were basically being heroes, just going out there, protecting innocent people. But now they're being arrested because they have powers, and they decided to not register as a way to keep their secret identity a secret. And so right now it's Peter Parker most likely going to switch sides in the next video. And so with that being said, I do hope you enjoyed today's comic book video. And if you do, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. Also, if you have any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, I'll see y'all next time. Later.